All right, hello YouTube. I received a inquiry from a viewer about the Sansui G55X, and I can't even continue down the road with this unit until I tell you that I worked on this thing painstakingly for 2.5 years, and I decided I was going to put it into the closet where I assumed that eventually I would forget about it. And anyway, to get to my point, it worked. Because I couldn't find it today to do this video. And then I was like, oh, you know what? I think I put it in garbage bags and boxes and covered it all up and threw it in my closet. So, you just kind of have to read between the lines on that. But, when someone spends 2.5 years on a unit, um, and I'm a pretty quick person, that kind of says something. So the inquiry was, and I'm trying to recall the specific words the best that I can. I have a severe headache today, so I'm not doing this in super bright light unless I absolutely have to. But I wanted to do just a little mock instruction that might be helpful. And I'm thinking the words were, I see the balance pot. How do I get to it? Well, first of all, when you're dealing with a monstrosity like this unit, and I'm sure the gentleman probably knows this, these knobs are fixed. They don't come off. They shoot through the front face, and then there's a bushing, a splined bushing that locks these knobs in. So you just can't simply pull the knob off like the old school units and take out the control nut and stuff like that. It doesn't work like that. So he said, I can see it, but how do I get to it? Well, flipping the unit around to the side here, setting it at 90 degrees to me and looking straight down the side, I can't even see the stinking balance pod inside this thing. I don't even know if I had a flashlight at this point if I would be able to see it. And I can tell you this much, taking the top cover off, you're not going to see it either. So maybe I need to just get away from the I can see it and deal with how do I get to it, because that I might be able to remedy. So I do things a little bit differently. Of course, you can sit here and spend a week and tear this whole thing apart and hope and pray that stuff doesn't get all busted up putting it back together. But I do things a little bit differently. If I were to do this, and this would be like a mock demonstration I'll just give you. And actually I had this pot out of here, I don't know if I said, probably like 6-7 months ago or something. I specifically recall I unlocked the top cover. These are snapped together joints. Kind of like Legos, only they don't work as well. So you have to unsnap this top joint, which generally involves trying to find some object to shove up into the top corner and push the flap down without breaking anything. And then sometimes you have to actually insert something from both sides of the unit. Not necessarily at the same time, but if you do it right, you can just unlock one corner of it at a time. If you're still holding force out on this, it won't snap back in, if you see what I'm saying, because it's basically just a flap that's notched out, and it just kind of slides into another notch that catches on it, and then it by friction or force, it just locks it together. And they're a real pain in the ass, I can guarantee you that much. So you want to unlock this top corner and start to pull it out. Because what you have to do is get the shaft of the balance control to separate from the inside bushing of the knob. And that shaft sits probably inside that bushing, I'm speculating quite a bit. Probably, it could be as much as 12, 15 millimeters just off the top of my head. So you need to be able to draw this board back here by that amount of dimension in order to get the shaft to pull out of here. And when you do that, and I'm just kind of sidestepping, you want to make sure that once you get this board pulled back, that you don't move your stinking knob, because it's a D shaft. So then you won't be able to get your pot to go back in it. And, you know, I don't know if this makes any sense. I'm hoping it does. So I specifically recall I had to pull this ribbon cable out. And let me just make sure that I had to pull the ribbon cable out to get the balance control out. And not to get some of these tone control caps located on the other side of the board. Now looking back here with a flashlight, I'm going right down the corner. I mean, straight line. If I just peer the very corner, I can almost see the corner of the pot. So I'm going to say yes. You're going to need to pull this ribbon cable out of there. And just off the top of my head, the troubles with these ribbon cables are, once you pull them out, they're tinned and you get little tiny frays, and they can be next to impossible to get back in the holes. Sometimes you have to drill the holes out 1 or 2 sizes over, and pull these out and retrim them and tin them and just mess with them for an insane amount of time to be able to get them to shoot back through those holes. And the hard part is, you're shooting it from the back side of the board, so you're shooting these wires through something that's blind. You can't even see it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. But pull this ribbon cable out, and that's going to free up a little bit of space directly behind that pot. Now, believe it or not, this is how I did mine. If you want to take the pot the whole way out. Because the chances of ever getting any deoxit into that pot, I can tell you, is not impossible, but it's extremely unlikely, because it did not work for me. It was so bad that, you know, basically I shot a can of it in there, and I figured eventually some of it will leak into that pot, and probably some of it did, but the pot was just so stinking bad. So I do everything with hemostats, and these are the best friend you can have. That and a whole bottle of nerve medication. So yank this guy out of there, and then you're going to want to, like I said, after you have this separated and you can move this joint up here, you're going to work this up towards the front as much as you can. Now the problem with that, let me just make sure, because no, it doesn't appear to be on this unit. There's only so far you're going to be able to shift this forward, because there's going to be things that are going to want to fight you. And let me just see. I don't see any huge issues there. I just wanted to make sure the corner of this board up on top is not locked. There's a lock there. So there has to be a lock up underneath where you can't see from this side. Yeah, it's gotta be. There's gotta be a board edge connector or a lock, basically a slide, up underneath here that you would only, if at best, would be able to see with the top cover removed, and that's really if at best. But in order to unlock that, you want to push this down, which just clears the notch, and that will free up this board to slide back. But you see the issue here is that board will only slide back so far before it's going to jam up against here. And this distance is not nearly as much as what the shaft is inside the plastic knob. So the board actually needs to come back much further. That's why this corner has to be unsnapped to push the front face forward to compensate for what this board won't come back. If you can follow me on that one. So the other thing too is this, and I don't even know if this is going to be probably going to have to move the camera here. Probably should have did that at the very start because I'm not so sure that what I was talking about can be too easily seen. Let me try to move some stuff around here. And it's a little bit harder to see on this one because I have my caps mounted on the back on the bottom of the board here. But the 6 points of the pot are way up here, and you're going to have to desolder them to take that pot out, and that creates a huge problem with how in the world do you get the iron into them. So the only way to really get to them, you could probably get to the back row of the 3 here if you were, if you had the best iron tip on, a long reacher iron tip, really with a really small conical tip on it, and you could get a desoldering pump in there to get them off, but you're not going to get the front without melting halfway through the front face of this. So you need to release this board and push it back some to the point at which you can just get a solder sucker and an iron in there to pull the solder off of those 6 pads. And then once you do that, then you have to pull the solder off the 2 bracket pads right here. And one thing about pulling the solder off of them to keep in mind is once you do this, you got to be kind of careful with the pot once you get it out, because it's going to be 100 times harder to get the pot back in than it was to get it out. So you don't want to bend these things up. When the factory set these in, they brought them straight out of the board, at least in this case. So when you pull solder off of them, you don't want to bend them or manipulate them too much, or more to the point while the pot is out of the unit. You don't want to do that because you'll never get them back in this method that I'm going to talk about. And that is simply to do this. Once you have them all cleared and this pulled forward and that shaft, D shaft, is separated from this, and you will be able to tell when that shaft is pulled back, when this board is pulled back enough to free that shaft up. Then, believe it or not, it is a process of reaching around with a pair of hemostats and grabbing a hold of that pot and yanking it right off the board. And anyone that's messed with stuff like this might hear me say this, and they might say that's going to be absolutely impossible to set that pot back in with those curved hemostats. But I can tell you I've done it. So I completely understand, because I mean, you're dealing with something that's completely blind. But if you don't disturb these pins and the dimensions don't get changed, it is entirely possible to pull that pot out with a pair of curved hemostats, and then work on the pot, and then set the pot right back in the same spot and solder it back in. Because I did it on this one. You know, did it take me a couple hours? And you know, did it take me 24 times of trying to do it? Maybe not 24, but I don't specifically recall. But that's the only that's how I did mine. I mean, you could, I guess you could probably just pull the front face off on both corners. You could probably separate this corner and also separate the top corner and try to pull the whole front face off. But boy, I don't know. I wouldn't even be able to think of what that would involve to do that. This seemed like the most sensible and possible way was to try to pull it out from a blind location with the hemostats. So that's really all I can say. I don't know any other way to do that. I mean, just getting these board locks to let go and pulling this board back. I mean, you can only go so far. I mean, you would have to take the whole center chassis and amp board out of it, which I have done, in order to get this to come back far enough. That's the only other way I see to do it, would be to pull the whole center amp board out. I did do that at one time, and after I did that, I said, well, there'll never be a second time on that one. But just thinking, I don't really see another way to get access to that pot. So I guess I'm just gonna have to kind of leave it at that, and hope that maybe something in there was helpful to somebody anyway. So hey, I'm sorry if I gave you a grim look here, but I mean, it is what it is. Those are the only options that I can see. Pull the whole center out, which is just taking a bunch of screws out here and taking the heatsink and the amp board out. You would have to unsolder this bar, which is soldered to the ground right between the filter caps. I remember that ordeal. Take this screw out and then loosen that up, and it'll flop inside, and maybe try to shift it out of the way a little bit until you can get enough clearance to bring this board the whole way back. You might be able to get enough clearance to bring this the whole way back to the point at which maybe you could flip this entire board out, and you wouldn't have to try to do an impossible fish with a pair of hemostats setting the pot back in. That seems like the most sensible way, even though that wasn't the way that I did it. So hey, hope I helped. Have yourself a wonderful day.